She couldn't stay quiet anymore. Not because she wanted attention. Not because she was seeking the spotlight. In fact, she had avoided it for years, standing just slightly to the side while the world watched her son reshape industries, challenge systems, and unsettle comfort zones. But there comes a moment when silence itself becomes a kind of betrayal. And that moment, according to those close to her, had finally arrived. Musk has always been known as composed, thoughtful, and measured. A woman who understands hardship, patience, and endurance far better than most people ever will. Long before the cameras, long before the applause, long before the headlines, she lived a life that demanded strength without applause. Single motherhood. Financial uncertainty. Raising 3 children while building a career in a world that didn't easily make space for women like her. She learned early that real power does not shout. It waits. It watches. And when it speaks, it does so with purpose. This is why, when she finally chose to speak, people leaned in. What she said wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. There were no threats or sensational claims. But the weight of it landed hard, because it wasn't really about Elon. Not in the way people expected. It was about you. About the world watching him. About the culture consuming ambition without understanding its cost. About the quiet dangers people overlook while they chase inspiration. She has seen the private side of greatness. Not the polished interviews or the viral clips, but the exhaustion that settles into the bones. The nights when ideas don't feel exciting anymore, just heavy. The pressure of being turned into a symbol rather than being allowed to remain human. And through all of that, she noticed something troubling in the way people respond to success. People admire results, but they rarely respect process. They worship outcomes, but ignore the sacrifices required to reach them. They quote visionaries, but refuse to listen when those same visionaries reveal the toll. Her warning was not be afraid of ambition. It was be careful what you chase without counting the cost. She has watched millions of people say they want to change the world, but very few are prepared for the loneliness that often comes with that desire. She has watched people praise resilience, while quietly mocking rest. She has seen how society rewards burnout as if it were a badge of honor, and she knows something else too: most people don't fail because they aren't talented enough. They fail because they try to live someone else's life instead of understanding their own limits, values, and calling. That is where her message turns personal. She is not warning you about Elon Musk. She is warning you about imitation without understanding. About chasing intensity when you were designed for depth. About confusing noise with purpose. She has seen what happens when the world turns a human being into a myth. People stop allowing them to be wrong. To pause. To evolve. And then they demand the same impossible standard from themselves. Hustle harder. Sleep less. Push further. Never stop. Never doubt. Never slow down. She knows how dangerous that mindset can be, because she lived the opposite truth. She survived not by burning brighter than everyone else, but by enduring longer. By adapting. By choosing consistency over spectacle. Her voice carries authority not because she is the mother of a billionaire, but because she is a woman who rebuilt her life more than once. She understands that success without stability is fragile. That brilliance without grounding can collapse. That vision without wisdom can consume the very person who carries it. And here is the part most people miss. Her warning isn't pessimistic. It's protective. She wants you to know that you are not required to destroy yourself to matter. You are not late because your journey looks quieter. You are not failing because your progress is slower. You are not weak because you need rest, community, or clarity. She sees a generation overwhelmed by comparison. People measuring their worth against timelines that were never meant for them. She sees people inspired by extraordinary stories, but secretly crushed because their own lives don't feel extraordinary enough. And she wants you to stop, not stop dreaming. Stop punishing yourself for being human. She knows that Elon's story is not a template. It is a testimony to a specific set of circumstances, temperament, risks, and sacrifices that cannot be copied without consequence. What worked for one person may break another. And no amount of motivation can change that truth. Her warning is gentle, but firm. Admire, but do not idolize. Learn, but do not imitate blindly. Be inspired, but remain rooted in who you are. She has seen too many people lose themselves chasing an image of success that doesn't fit them. People who could have built meaningful lives, but instead spent years feeling inadequate because they weren't becoming someone else fast enough. She wants you to understand that your value is not measured by disruption, wealth, or visibility. It is measured by alignment. By whether your life makes sense to your soul. By whether your growth is sustainable. By whether you can look at yourself in quiet moments and feel peace instead of pressure. There is something else she understands deeply. The world is loud, but wisdom is often quiet. And if you don't learn how to listen to quiet truths, you will be driven endlessly by loud expectations. She isn't asking you to abandon ambition. She is asking you to anchor it. To build a life that can hold success without collapsing under it. To ask yourself not just how far can I go, but what am I willing to give up to get there? And is it worth it? Because she knows something painful that few people talk about. Not everyone who reaches the top enjoys the view. Some arrive exhausted, isolated, and unsure of who they are without the chase. Her warning is an invitation to choose a different kind of strength. One that allows ambition and well-being to coexist. One that honors effort without glorifying suffering. One that recognizes that your path does not need to look dramatic to be meaningful. She couldn't stay quiet anymore because too many people are hurting silently, believing they are broken because they don't fit the loudest success stories. Too many people think they are behind, when they are actually building something deeper. She wants you to know that slow growth is still growth. That unseen progress still counts. That a life lived with intention is far more powerful than a life lived for applause. And perhaps the most important part of her warning is this: you do not owe the world your burnout. You do not owe society your peace. You do not owe anyone a performance that costs you your soul. She speaks not as a celebrity, not as a commentator, but as a mother who has seen what relentless pressure can do, and what quiet resilience can heal. Listen to that, because sometimes the most important warnings don't come with alarms or headlines. They come softly, from someone who has already walked through the fire and doesn't want you to burn just to prove you were brave. She knows how easily people misunderstand silence. They assume it means weakness, fear, or lack of ambition. But she has learned that silence is often where the strongest decisions are made. It is where survival plans are drawn, where patience is practiced, where character is forged without witnesses. She lived many years in that silence, watching the world only notice her story once it became convenient to admire it. That is why her warning carries such depth. She sees how quickly people consume stories like her son's without understanding the hidden weight behind them. They scroll past sleepless nights. They skip over years of uncertainty. They ignore the emotional cost of being misunderstood on a global scale. They only see the outcome and decide that anything less must be failure. She wants you to understand that comparison is one of the most dangerous habits of this generation. Not because it makes you jealous, but because it slowly erases gratitude, patience, and self-trust. It convinces you that if you are not moving at someone else's speed, you are standing still. And that simply isn't true. She has watched Elon move forward while being criticized, doubted, and attacked. But she has also watched him struggle with the weight of expectations placed on him by people who don't know him. And she knows that not everyone is built to carry that kind of pressure. Most people shouldn't have to. Her message is not about toughness. It's about discernment. She wants you to stop confusing intensity with importance. Just because something is loud, fast, and visible doesn't mean it is valuable. Some of the most meaningful work in the world happens quietly, slowly, and without applause. Some of the strongest people will never trend, never be quoted, never be celebrated, and yet their lives will be full, steady, and deeply impactful. She knows how tempting it is to believe that suffering automatically leads to greatness. But she has learned that suffering without wisdom only leads to exhaustion. Pain alone does not make you special. Growth does. Healing does. Choosing better when you know better does. She sees people pushing themselves beyond healthy limits, not because they believe in their mission, but because they are afraid of being ordinary. Afraid of being left behind. Afraid of being forgotten. And she wants to tell you something gently, but clearly: being ordinary is not a curse. Living without meaning you don't need to be extreme to be effective. You don't need to be relentless to be respected. You don't need to sacrifice your mental peace to prove your dedication. Those ideas may sell well online, but they don't hold up in real life. She understands seasons. Seasons of pushing, and seasons of protecting. Seasons of building, and seasons of repairing. She knows that even the strongest structures collapse if they are never maintained. Her warning is also about identity. She has watched people attach their entire worth to productivity. When they slow down, they feel empty. When they fail, they feel erased. When they rest, they feel guilty. That is a dangerous way to live. She wants you to know that you are more than what you produce. More than what you achieve. More than what you can prove. Your existence alone has value, even on days when nothing impressive happens. She has learned that success amplifies what already exists inside a person. If there is unresolved pain, it grows louder. If there is insecurity, it becomes heavier. If there is wisdom, it deepens. That is why inner work matters more than external speed. And this is where her warning becomes almost maternal. She is telling you not to rush your becoming. Not to trade your wholeness for urgency. Not to let the world pressure you into a pace that breaks you. She has seen what happens when people skip the slow lessons. They arrive somewhere impressive, but fragile. They look successful, but feel lost. They have everything they thought they wanted, except the ability to enjoy it. She doesn't want that for you. She wants you to build a life you don't need to escape from. A path that still feels like yours even when no one is watching. A definition of success that includes health, relationships, peace, and purpose, not just recognition. Her warning is quiet, but it is firm. Don't let admiration turn into self-betrayal. Don't let inspiration turn into pressure. Don't let someone else's destiny distract you from your own. She stayed quiet for a long time because she knew the world wasn't ready to hear this. But now, watching so many people burn themselves out chasing borrowed dreams, she chose to speak, and if you listen closely, you'll realize she isn't asking you to do less. She's asking you to do what's right for you. Because real success doesn't just look good from the outside. It feels sustainable on the inside. She also understands something most people only learn after years of struggle. The world rarely tells you when you're doing too much. It usually applauds you for it. It rewards overextension with praise. It calls exhaustion dedication and labels neglect of self as discipline. She has watched this pattern repeat itself over and over, not just in famous lives, but in ordinary homes, quiet offices, and unseen battles. That is why her warning feels almost like a whisper meant only for those willing to slow down long enough to hear it. She knows that many people are not chasing success because they love what they are building, but because they are running from something inside themselves. Fear of being enough. Fear of being chosen. Fear of being still. And ambition, when fueled by fear, becomes a prison rather than a purpose. She has lived long enough to recognize the difference. She has seen how easily people confuse movement with progress. How being busy can become a convenient way to avoid asking hard questions. Who am I without achievement? What do I value when no one is impressed? What remains when the applause fades? She wants you to ask those questions now, not later, because later often arrives as burnout, disillusionment, or emptiness that no milestone can fill. Her warning is also about patience in an age that hates waiting. She grew up in a time where things took longer, where results weren't instant, where character was shaped slowly. She knows that speed is seductive, but depth takes time. And depth is what sustains you when motivation disappears. She sees people demanding immediate clarity, instant success, and overnight transformation. And she wants you to know that rushing clarity often leads to regret. Some answers only come after you've lived the question long enough. She has watched Elon endure years of criticism before being understood, and she has watched others collapse under far less pressure. Not because they were weaker, but because their foundations were thinner. Strength is not about how much you can carry once. It's about how much you can carry repeatedly without breaking, and she knows this. Resilience is built in quiet, unglamorous moments. In routines no one praises. In boundaries no one sees. In choices that look boring from the outside but feel right on the inside. She is warning you not to skip those moments. She is also speaking to those who feel invisible. Those who believe their lives don't matter because they aren't extraordinary enough. She wants you to know that the world runs on people who show up consistently, not just those who disrupt dramatically. Impact is not always explosive. Sometimes it is steady, faithful, and unseen. She has learned that meaning is not found by becoming impressive, but by becoming honest. Honest about your limits. Honest about your needs. Honest about what kind of life you actually want, not the one you feel pressured to want. Her warning is a reminder that you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to justify joy. You don't have to apologize for choosing peace over pressure. She sees how many people live as if life is a race with no finish line, constantly accelerating but never arriving. And she wants you to step out of that race long enough to ask whether you even chose it, because the most dangerous trap is not failure. It's success that costs you yourself. She speaks with the calm authority of someone who has survived long seasons of uncertainty. Someone who knows that endurance matters more than intensity. That balance outlasts extremes. That a life built with care will hold you when life becomes heavy. She didn't speak sooner because she knows advice is only useful when someone is ready to hear it. And perhaps now, with so many people tired, anxious, and questioning their path, her warning finally makes sense. She is telling you this because she believes you deserve a life that is not just admired, but lived, and she hopes you will listen, not with urgency, but with wisdom. And so this is where her warning gently comes to rest, not with fear, not with pressure, but with clarity. She wants you to understand that life is not meant to be survived in constant urgency. It is meant to be inhabited, felt, lived with awareness. She has watched too many people postpone joy, connection, and peace until some imaginary future moment when they are finally enough. And she knows that moment rarely arrives the way people expect. She has learned that success does not quiet insecurity. Money does not heal wounds. Recognition does not replace belonging. If those things are missing before the achievement, they will still be missing after it, only louder. Her warning is not against dreaming big. It is against forgetting yourself while you dream. She wants you to build something that still allows you to breathe. To succeed in ways that don't require you to disappear emotionally. To pursue growth without turning your life into a constant test of endurance. She has seen how fragile admiration can be. How quickly the world moves on. How praise fades, trends change, and attention shifts. And she knows that if your worth is tied to those things, your peace will always be unstable. That is why she urges you to root your life in something deeper than validation. In values that don't change with algorithms. In purpose that doesn't collapse when plans fail. In relationships that don't depend on performance. She understands that not everyone will be remembered by history books. But everyone will have to live with themselves. And that, she believes, is the relationship that matters most. She wants you to stop measuring your life against the loudest examples. Stop assuming that visibility equals value. Stop believing that struggle is proof you're doing something right. Sometimes struggle is simply a sign that something needs to change. She has learned that wisdom often sounds like permission. Permission to slow down. Permission to choose differently. Permission to define success in a way that doesn't cost you your health, your relationships, or your sense of self. And if there is one thing she hopes you take from her words, it is this: you are allowed to live a good life, not just an impressive one. You are allowed to grow at your own pace. To want stability as much as achievement. To protect your inner world as fiercely as your ambitions. She couldn't stay quiet anymore because she sees a world full of capable people who are exhausted, discouraged, and quietly wondering why success feels so heavy. And she wants you to know that it doesn't have to be that way. There is another path. A steadier one. A kinder one. One where ambition and peace are not enemies. One where progress does not require self-erasure. One where your life makes sense not just to others, but to you. Her warning is not a command. It is an offering. Listen to it when you feel rushed. Remember it when comparison creeps in. Return to it when you forget that your worth was never something you had to prove, because in the end, the most powerful thing you can build is not a legacy the world applauds, but a life you don't regret living.